This is Real Sports Talk, Rumack and the Greek, featuring Billy the Greek and Stormin Norman Rumack, brought to you by the good people at Cosa and Carpets for Life.
Holy jeez, look at this. So, how you doing, you scoundrels? Billy the Greek here, 7 p.m. on a look outside, man. It's 7 p.m. on a kind of a, I don't know, kind of a lackluster kind of day, just like this lackluster introduction. Anyways, I'm Billy the Greek. Got a good show for you today, special show. So for those of you that tune in, obviously, and follow us for the better part of the years that we've been doing this, you missed what's his name again? Stormin Norman Rumack, my co-host. Took a sabbatical week, we had a little bit of discussion, so decided, I'm going to give him one more chance. So Norm's going to be joining us. We got a really special guest, too, on board. We got the assistant to the president. So assistant to the president, you know what that means? That means he's an important guy, a loved guy, and one of the most respected hockey men in North America, Florida Panthers assistant to the GM, Rick Dudley. We got the Cosa Classic, 1985 Cosa Classic, featuring the guy that pays the bills around here, well, some of them anyways, and that's Bill O'Donnell and the good people at Cosa. And don't forget, again, we're very happy to be associated with Nick Borsch and the Mayor of Carpets. Click Nick Borsch, Mayor of Carpets, and you'll see why he's earned that moniker. Enough of me. Here's the most important thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because again, a lot of people are putting on videos, social media. Everybody's an expert, right? Even guys like Rumack are an expert. So sometimes I'm very I don't want to come on here and toot my horn and be of a braggadocious nature, but we got to play a video here, man, and see what the Greek's all about. And when we come back from that video, we got Norm Rumack and Mr. Rick Dudley on the other side. Enjoy this minute and a half. Just watch it, pay attention, and then you tell me, I don't know, sheer luck or a little bit of skill from the kid.
Donald travels to the War Memorial Auditorium to face what appears to be this year anyways, a young up-and-coming Sabre team fighting for a playoff spot. Leafs go in there, Ryan O'Reilly, and all the boys. So, Greek, what's it going to be, man? What's the final score of the game? How can I put a little money in your pocket? Here's what I'm going to tell you. I don't know who's going to win, but I'm going to tell you that the winning score is going to be over the number 6.5. Everybody wants a lot of cash, but nobody wants to work. So, all right, I understand. I understand your predicament, so I'm here to help. This NHL, more specifically Maple Leaf Previews, brought to you by my good friends at Carpets for Life. Nick Borsch, the mayor. Click the link on the post. His name is on the post. Click the link and you'll know why they call him the mayor. Residential, commercial, otherwise they'll take care of you. This guy over here, Billy the Greek, coming off a little bit of a heater. Pulled out 5 wins in a row. Still smoking putters, but I pulled out 5 wins in a row, so let's see what the future's got in store. Minnesota, you'd expect, historically they've been good defensively, but the much maligned Toronto blue line team back end, from the beginning of the year we've been hearing people complain about the goaltending, guys like Cole, all the back end, but they're still 4th in the league in goals against, which to me is somewhat surprising. Nevertheless, you put those two teams together, the play in the Leaf game is the under at 6. Austin Matthews tonight gets off the schneid. If you watch the last couple of Leaf games, it's a poor bastard, man. He's like invisible, man. Can't score, hasn't got the puck, is watching the Willie Nylander show. A guy like that, he's got you saw him on the other day on the celebration when Willie scored the overtime winner. Did you see his face? He was happy, but you could see he was a little envious, man. He was a little pissed off. So look for Austin Matthews to score 2 goals tonight.
Geez, man. I just, what? I could sit here, Norm Rumack, and watch that video. No, we got a big guest, obviously. I could just sit and watch that video and regale, man, and just, what a pleasure it is, Norm, to be as gifted as I am, as much of a visionary, and to be able to take the 40 years of knowledge I've amassed and be able to share that kind of information with the people. You know how happy it makes me. I can't even tell you. And again, it's just a pleasure for me to really, really, I don't know, just see myself, talk about myself, and just really, really, really in the most humble of ways tell you guys, man, just that I'm the best thing since sliced bread. That guy over there's the ham and nigger. He's the better half of the thing, former voice of the Fan 590. Stormin Norman Rumack, my partner. Norma, what do you got to say? That was some pretty impressive stuff, was it not?
Yeah, almost as impressive as me nailing the Leaf playoff predictions the last 2 years and nailing the exact margin for the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. But nonetheless, we got more important things to talk about and a great guest. His name, one of my most loyal friends, Mr. Rick Dudley, special advisor, Florida Panthers. And boy, talk about a resume, not only as a player with the Buffalo Sabres, Stanley Cup finalist, 1975, management. He was the guy. Rick Dudley was the guy who brought Marty St. Louis to the up-and-coming Stanley Cup champions of 2004, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now look, Marty, coaching Montreal Canadiens. Rick's got a long resume with numerous clubs, including the Maple Leafs, Ottawa Senators, Florida Panthers, Carolina Hurricanes, Atlanta Thrashers when they're in the league, and Chicago Blackhawks. But anyway, it speaks for itself, and I bet right now he could still drop the gloves with most of the NHL heavyweights and hold his own. But we're here to talk about what's been a blockbuster week and a half of transactions. So, Rick, I'm just going to quickly run by, and thanks for joining Bill and I, our audience. We love it. As I mentioned, you're a very loyal friend to me, and I'm grateful for that. But some of the names that have been transacted, quickly, obviously, for the Leafs, the big one, Ryan O'Reilly, the Bruins, not taking a backseat, even only having lost 8 games. So they get Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway. You know, a while back, the Islanders got Bo Horvat. The Devils, that's a blockbuster. Holy smokes, you need an encyclopedia to keep track of all the names. Timo Meier, the biggest name. And the Lightning, not wanting to be outdone, get themselves Mr. Janot, feeling they need some toughness. So, again, that's just kind of like skimming the surface. But in any particular order, Rick, your reaction to all these deals that have gone down and how you guess they might impact these clubs coming up in the playoffs.
Well, you were breaking up there, but I think you were asking me my opinion of the trades that it's gone on in the NHL. I think what the GMs in the National Hockey League are proving over the last few years, including this year, is that they don't have any qualms about taking a run at it. And you know what? There's part of me that likes it. There's part of me that doesn't like it. I don't like to give up assets like picks. If I can help it, but if you're in a position like we were last year, and we hope to be this year, and some of the teams like the Boston Bruins have had such a phenomenal year, they've got to believe right now that they've got a chance, as do the Toronto Maple Leafs, and so I admire those GMs for having the courage to say, you know what, this might bite me in the end, but I'm going to take a run at it.
Mm-hmm. Rick, did you have Rick the opportunity to watch the preamble of the video?
You still going?
I did, and I was pretty much in awe.
Finally, man, finally somebody that can understand the magnitude of that greatness. Here's the question, Rick, I want to ask you, and I'm very curious to know, how is a man of my intellect, my ability, man, I just showed you right there. It's pretty impressive stuff. How's a man of my intellect not a part of the brain trust of an organization, i.e. maybe, I don't know, maybe a little advisor to Rick Dudley? Maybe
it's hard to believe.
Something to do in the Florida Panther organization.
Billy, it's really hard. It's hard to believe. It's actually something I've thought about many times in my life.
It is,
and I can't understand it.
It's shocking, but on a more serious
note. And you guys are breaking up, so I'm hearing about half.
Yeah, so we'll try to.
I'm in very rural Florida.
Here's why we break up when we both talk at the same time. So Norm, please don't talk as much as you're used to. Let me and Rick connect a little bit. It's important stuff. One question at a time, Norm. So I'm going to ask the first question, Rick, and it's we'll stay away from we'll get back to what's going on around the league, but closer to home, to your Florida Panthers. You're obviously, I don't know if disappointment's the right word, but obviously you've had your adversities with Barkov and what have you. You're fighting for a wild card spot now, right? So I'm sure you've had discussions in which direction to move and what have you. Does the price that you've seen teams in contention pay for acquiring talent, does that change the Florida Panther franchise's view on whether to add or subtract? because these prices, in my estimation, have been outrageous in terms of cost analysis and acquisition on behalf of the teams that are selling. I don't know if you agree with that, but does that enter in the conversation that you guys have in terms of the direction that you're going to take?
Well, of course. I mean, anytime people are asking for to trade you an asset and they're asking for a huge return, that better be a pretty good asset. And obviously, in the last few years, we've been people who were thinking of winning a Stanley Cup, and when we gave it a good shot. We lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning last year, who were a hell of a team, and Vasilevsky was brilliant in goal against us. But we had a good team. We had a chance, that's for sure. And I think that all of the teams that make the playoffs think they have a chance. I think there are some. If you're having a season like Boston is having, like the Leafs are having, you have to look at it and say, this might be our window. This might be our chance.
So, Rick, I want to ask you about the Boston Bruins. And you and I were talking off air before we started rolling on the show. And, my recollection, and you were a player back then, you played against the Montreal Scotty Bowman's dynastic, maybe one of the greatest teams ever, at the very least, Montreal Canadiens. 1976, they lost 8 games a whole year. And that was a team where almost everybody was a Hall of Famer. So for Boston right now to only have lost 8 games, and the rate they're going, may not be too many more than that, depending on injuries. But so let me ask you, how surprised or not surprised are you at what the Bruins have done, and how the acquisitions they've made might impact them further?
Well, I think they've made their defense a lot stronger for sure. I think they're an incredibly well-coached team, like the 74-75 Montreal Canadiens. I think they're a team that believes in what they're doing right now. So if you want to add an Orlov or a player like that, you can do that. I think they did that.
Yes, they did. That's right.
Historically, sorry, go ahead, Rick.
I just got back from Europe, by the way, boys. So I'm a little out of the loop here.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I was 3 weeks in Europe.
Where more specifically?
Where?
More specifically, where in Europe?
Sweden games, and then did Finland and Czechoslovakia and Slovakia, and I ended up at the last night. I ended up in Copenhagen because that's where my plane took off from.
No kidding. When you're running around in Europe and that, Dutch, do you get pulled over on the streets? People asking you for autographs, signing stuff, or can you move under the radar?
On a rare occasion, somebody actually in a building, a hockey building, the odd guy knows who I am, and it's kind of gratifying, really.
Yeah.
But most the people over there, especially places like the Czech Republic, where hockey's so big there, it's so important there. It's fun to be in those buildings. They're incredibly loud. They sing. The fans sing from the start of the game to the end, and it's kind of fun to be around.
Excellent. So Rick, in terms of Tampa Bay Lightning, they've had a bit of a, for them anyways, a downturn. So they add some toughness. That's what they thought they were lacking. But who knows what they'll do? I mean, I think their series with the Maple Leafs has all the makings of a classic, like maybe 7 games and 7 overtimes, and maybe 2 or 3 periods of overtime. I think they're that well matched. But is Tampa, with all they've gotten, with all they've done, you think of all the mileage they've accumulated in going to Stanley Cup finals, and this as a player, how much of a toll does that take on? Does it put them at a disadvantage because of all the extra games and weeks and months they've been playing hockey the last number of years?
Sure it does, especially at the start of the season. I think they're probably over it by now. But at the start of the season, after you've just come off a run like they had, it seems like 2 weeks before your season ended, and you jumped right back in it, and it's tough. We went to the finals, and it was the next year at training camp was a little tough.
Mm-hmm.
But,
so I would say, Rick, go ahead, finish. Sorry, Rick, because you took a little spot there. I didn't know you were finished your thought. Sorry to interrupt.
After we went to the finals, I went to the WHA, but the Sabres had a little bit of a slow start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was natural. All those guys had played so many games.
Here's the question that I have. Again, see where you're at in terms of the Boston Bruins, more specifically. We've got some Bruin. Actually, there's a lot of Bruin fans in Southern Ontario, especially when you head down towards when you head east a little bit. A lot of Bruin fans up in this region. Here's the one thing that I would be concerned about. If you're a Boston guy, right, or a Boston fan or part of the management, it's when you make the playoffs, playoffs require, would we agree, another gear. Like, you got to take your game up a level does Boston, Rick, in your estimation, how much better can this goddamn team play? Do they have another gear? Like,
I don't
that's
know.
what I'm scared of when they make the playoffs. You remember Tampa Bay had 130 points, right? And Columbus just give them a couple of smacks and sent them home in 4 games. Yeah. Do you fear that if you're a Bruin guy? Like, you can't really play any better come playoff time.
No, and I think that's what they have to focus on, is playing as well as they have. They have to get the same level of goaltending that they've had. And that will be a new experience, I think, for the guy who carries the load in goal there. He'll be in the playoffs and probably on a team that's expected to win. It can be tough on them. But they've got a lot of seasoned players that have had success there. I mean, the leadership and the culture in that dressing room, I don't think they're going to slip too much. If you beat the Boston Bruins, you're beating a hell of a good hockey team, and you have to be a good team yourself.
Hey, Rick, speaking of a hell of a good hockey team, we haven't mentioned yet, but they are a hell of a good hockey team. How scary might the New York Rangers be in the playoffs?
They've got incredible amounts of talent. They're an exciting team. They've got the goaltending. They could be special, very special. I like their coach. I think they were close last year. I like what they do, and I think if their players come anywhere near playing at their optimal level, they could be deadly. Of course, there's several teams in the East that you can say that about.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Consensus around these parts, Rick, is Kyle Dubas, call him little Kyle. Anyways, Mr. Dubas is best way I can describe it. Mr. Dubas might lose his job if the Leafs don't produce this season. Have you ever been in a situation where you know your job is on the line and you'd have to go through a trade deadline or anything like that? Because obviously, if you know you're being fired, right, or if you know your job's on the line, you weren't extended, so the hint is there, obviously. Do you think that impacts the way your level of aggression towards making decisions? And if you were in that similar predicament, or have been in your career, would you handle things similarly, or would you have a concern for the GM that might be taking your spot in the year to come?
I don't think Kyle will do that. I think he's a bright guy, and he's not going to panic. He's going to do what he thinks is in the best interest of the organization, both in the near term and the long term. I don't think if your question is, will he sell his soul to help cement that job? I don't think so. He's got too much integrity.
Hey, Rick Dudley is our special guest, special advisor to the Florida Panthers. Long resume of management roles in several teams in the National Hockey League, including the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Cup winners of 2004, including working with the Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, Winnipeg Jets, Atlanta Thrashers, and now with the Florida Panthers. So, Rick, I know from your playing days, you would have known what a great guy and what a funny guy Bruce is. They like to call him Gabby Boudreau is, and it was and still is. I just remember when he was coaching Washington, you can always do a phone interview with him, and he'd still come up with a laugh. Of course, he had a role in the Slapshot movie, skating, and he laughs at himself. Were you, for lack of a better term, Rick Dudley, surprised at the way the Vancouver Canucks handled that situation, and they received a lot of criticism for it?
Yeah, I don't know how you handle situations like that and come out of it well. To be honest with you, again, I've spent a lot of time in Europe. I heard about it. I didn't pay that much attention to it, except to say that's too bad. Another good guy lost a job, and that does happen in our sport. I don't know the circumstances close to the team.
Okay. All right. So just on Bruce Bruder himself, you knew him as a player. Actually was a record setter in the American Hockey League, and got called up for a bit with the Maple Leafs in the playoffs against the Flyers. I think it was in '76. Played on their fourth line. What have been your impressions of him in the numerous stops he's had as a coach?
Players like to play for him. He's a guy that relies on his staff a great deal. He was, as a player, by the way, I thought he should play in the National Hockey League. I thought he would be a National Hockey League regular. He was a talented guy, but as a coach, he gets a lot. His teams usually play, the individual players play close to their optimal level when they play for Bruce, close at or near their optimal level, and that's probably one of the most difficult jobs as a coach, is to make sure that all your players are performing. And he does. He's done a good job of that wherever he's been.
Duds, do you think we should just in case some people are tuning in? What do you think we should I rewind that video that I started off with, just in case some of the people didn't? What do you think?
I think it should go national. For sure. I think CNN, ESPN, all the national networks, the big ones should pick it up.
The big ones, eh?
Yeah.
Hey, Rick,
says hold on, Rumack, says Mr. Dudley somewhat facetiously, Rick. But if I do it for another month or so consecutively, man, I'm going to send it to you directly, man, and we'll work together. Here's the question I want to know, and this is just from my own curious mind. You hear a lot of talk about. We had to talk about a certain guy on your Florida club, Ratko Dudas, and we talked about what he brings in the room. Much has been made of Ryan O'Reilly, what he brings to the room, leadership. What does that mean, Rick? Take us inside the room, because you tell me the guy brings a lot to the room, right? Okay, great. Explain to me, what does he bring? What does that mean, man? Like in terms of something tangible.
In different players, in different settings, they bring different things, all of which amount to leadership. In Gudas's case, it's the way he plays on the ice, but also the enthusiasm he has for the game. Ryan O'Reilly's a guy that the St. Louis Blues a few years back made a major trade for, and it ended up Blake Wheeler went on to whoever it was went on to or Tage Thompson has gone on to a great career, but they won the Stanley Cup, so they made a good trade. The St. Louis Blues made a good trade in that case. Ryan O'Reilly was a guy who was renowned in Buffalo as the leader on the team. And so there are different ways. Some people do it on the ice. Some people go out on the ice and play so hard that it rubs off on their teammates. Some people do it vocally in the room where they're espousing the virtues of winning. And I think as a coach or as a manager, you're trying to get people to understand that the collective good is also the individual good, because we are all basically, in our own way, we're selfish. We're worried about our family and our own needs. And when you can get a group of people, and those types like the O'Reillys and people like that, when you can get people in your dressing room that bring people in together and make them understand that for them to have the success they want to have, that the team has to also be successful, then you've really got something. And when you put people like that in the dressing room, it goes a long way to get to that point.
Can you create that, Rick? Rick, when you're dealing, like you're developing hockey players, right? And you're scouting and can you develop that in a human being? Can you teach a kid how to be a leader? Can you develop those skills? Can you work with somebody, or is that something that's just a straight DNA thing?
No, I think you can help bring it out of somebody. I think it has to be there someplace. But I've seen lots of athletes that were thought of as not being leaders, and they end up being just that. Just they are leaders, and they are people who that the other people respond to. you like to think that as an athlete you mature, and different people mature at different times. And again, we can go back to Tage Thompson. He's now a key guy on a pretty good hockey team, and and I don't think a few years ago he would have been thought of as the leader on that team, the go-to guy, the guy that everybody goes around and they want to see how Tage is doing tonight. And I think he's become all of that in Buffalo.
Rick, I want to ask you about another team we haven't mentioned yet, but certainly, that they've shown that they can be a team that can be dangerous and maybe themselves go on a long run. What's your assessment of where they sit right now as they're currently composed of the Carolina Hurricanes?
They're a wonderful team. They're brilliantly, if I said that right, coached. They have a lot of pieces. I think they probably believe right now that they're good enough, but they're going to probably look, I'm guessing, but I'd say they'll probably look to add a piece, to add depth, to add something. But I think they think their team is pretty special, and it's easy to think that way. Their big question going into the playoffs will probably be around their goaltending. But their goaltending at times this year has been very, very good, and they have some very special players.
Right. So just quickly, are they as capable as the other teams we've mentioned, including Toronto, Tampa, obviously Boston, the Rangers? Do they have that same ability to be that good and maybe surprise?
Well, I think they just reeled off a 12-1 stretch, and I think a lot of those games were against very good teams. I think they're capable of. Again, I'm a huge Rod Brindamore fan. I think he's a brilliant coach. I think he does such a wonderful job there, and the players would skate right through the end of the rink for him. And I think anytime you have a talented group as they have there, and you have a coach like that, it gives you a chance for sure.
Here's Rick. Here's one of the unfortunate pieces that's going to transpire in terms of the Stanley Cup playoffs, the upcoming playoffs, is that 2 out of the 4 best records in the league, as it sits today in the Eastern Conference, will be eliminated without winning a playoff round. Do you guys, you personally, or the league in general, is it time to kind of revisit this playoff format? Because guys up here, right, Toronto, Tampa Bay, all right, that's fine, good hockey. But do you think it's good for the game that Toronto and Tampa Bay know they're going to meet in the playoffs in in December?
There's a lot of things that you can look at. The fact that we had 21 teams and 16 of them at that time made the playoffs, and now we have 32 teams and 16 make the playoffs. I'm not sure that there isn't room to add a couple of teams to the playoff picture. I don't think it hurts anything. I think it's very important for the fans to have hope going into March and April. And when they have that, would I prefer a 1 through 8 conference playoffs? Yes.
How about a 1 through 16? 1 through 16, which would be in terms of bringing it back, it'd be kind of interesting. Obviously, I know Bettman wants to establish rivalries and this and that, but there would be kind of like a kind of reward, like to being on top of the standings in terms of like, all right, Boston is great, but you're not going to get a kiss in the 8th seed when you're talking about the Eastern Conference, man. No. Boston's going to have to go to war against anybody. That's not much of an advantage for finishing first in the season, right? Couldn't the argument be?
I mean, from a standpoint of the fairest way, it would be, in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me, but in my opinion, I would say 1 through 16 would be the fairest way we could go. But I think originally it was because of the geographical commitments that people might be flying for a playoff series back and forth from one side of the country or the continent to another. And I think that was one of the considerations. It took so much out of the team doing that. But you know what? On a fairness level, the team that grinds it out and ends up first overall should probably play the weakest opposition. That would be the fairest way, probably.
Hey, Rick, as I mentioned right off the top, and most people know, or a lot of people know, you were the guy when you were in management in Tampa Bay in their first Stanley Cup. You were the guy who it's one of the best steals ever. You brought Marty St. Louis out of Calgary down to Tampa Bay, and we know the rest of the story after that with Vinny and the rest of the group and the stand, and of course Dave Anderchuk, a huge leadership role in that dressing room, the former Maple Leaf and Sabre. So you look at Marty now, the Montreal coach. And, he got respect instantly. And even though the Habs, a big rebuild they're undertaking, just from your observations, how do you size him up as a coach, and how good of a coach might he become?
I think he's done a remarkable job he wasn't an overly experienced coach when he went in there. But I can tell you one thing about Marty is, the honesty that's involved. The element of honesty that's involved with this guy. And if he's talking to a hockey player, the player knows, first of all, that he wants to get the best out of that player, but he also knows whatever he says to him is what he believes. There's no politics to it. There's nothing like that. And I think they understand that he does care about them. And that's why I think he'll end up being a very successful coach, because I think players in today's game, I think it's important to them that they actually believe that their coach believes in them and wants the best for them. And Marty's certainly that guy.
And in terms of, obviously, one of your elite skills is assessing talent. From your perspective, have the Habs got the right building blocks with the youngsters they brought in the last year or so?
Well, they have some great pieces. Obviously, the first pick last year was a guy that I saw a lot in Europe, and he's going to be a very, very good player. But he's not the only one. I mean, you can go up and down that roster, and they have young pieces in place that are only going to get better for the next 3 or 4 years. And I would say it might take them a little time, but they're going to be a very good team.
Mm-hmm. We're with Rick Dudley, specialist, NHL, an NHL legend, one of the biggest gentlemen in the game, currently special advisor to the Florida Panthers. Rick, we got to pay some bills. Are you a harness fan? Do you ever go to the track, bet a couple of 20s on the harness race?
Not for a long time.
All right, so then I'm going to bring you back to memory lane. We got a sponsorship with the Central Ontario Standardbred Association, and the president of that is Mr. Bill O'Donnell. So we're gonna do a little bit of sniffing. We're gonna show this Costa Classic featuring a race from 1985 with the King of Costa, Bill O'Donnell, and we'll be right back with Rick Dudley after this.
Here they come. And they're off. Out first is Shannon Majority, and Falcon Sealster moves to the inside. Annihilator away third. Good-natured fella from the outside. Then it's what's next and around the first turn. Shannon Majority now striding out to a 3.5 length lead. Falcon Sealster racing in second. Good-natured fella is third. Annihilator is fourth. He's 7 lengths off the lead now. What's next races in fifth position, followed by Stonebridge Skipper. The opening quarter, 26-2. Amazing first quarter. Shannon Majority was the one that set the pace. And Falcon Sealster is racing in second position. And now O'Donnell puts Annihilator in gear. And he's on the move on the outside. He's up into third. And he's going right on after Shannon Majority, the leader. Annihilator taking charge. A dramatic rush to the lead. Falcon Sealster comes off the rail. The first quarter, 26-2. Here's the half mile, 53 4/5 seconds. He's ahead of Niatros's pace. His half mile was 54 3. And the field moves into the far turn. Annihilator and Bill O'Donnell at the lines. They're in front by 2 lengths. Falcon Sealster is second. The others are far behind. It's almost 10 lengths back to Stonebridge Skipper racing in third. Less than 3/8 of a mile to go. Annihilator looking for the world record. Falcon Sealster in close pursuit. 7 lengths now back to the rest. The 3/4 mark. 1:21 and 2/5 seconds. The field turns for home. Annihilator with long and powerful strides, and Bill O'Donnell urging him on. They're after the world record. Falcon Silster is racing in second. They're coming to the final 16th. It's only Annihilator against the clock. Falcon Silster in pursuit. They're coming to the finish. O'Donnell going to work. Here's Annihilator. Here's the final time. 1:49.3. This is the fastest race mile in history, and just 2 ticks off the time trial record of Niatros. Annihilator, another devastating performance.
By now, you know the name COSA TV, an industry leader producing unique, high-quality digital content promoting harness racing in Ontario. Features, virtual programming, live events, and more. COSA TV has it covered. Follow our social media channels and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page to view the latest content. And if you're looking to bet your favorite Ontario track, check out hpibet.com. COSA TV, taking Ontario racing global.
Welcome to Carpets for Life. For over 30 years, we have been servicing both residential and commercial clients in the sales and installation of custom stair runners on wall-to-wall areas. Our team prides itself in honesty with a regard of professionalism and customer satisfaction. Our many testimonials and continuous referrals is a testament of the quality of workmanship we provide. We strive to ensure a happy customer is a Carpets for Life customer.
All right. Thanks to COSA, Standardbred Horse Racing Association of Ontario, and Nicky, the king of carpets, big Montreal Canadiens fan. So, of course, he would have liked, and I'm sure he'd loved hearing what our great friend and special guest Rick Dudley had to say about the Habs and their coach, Marty St. Louis. You know, Rick, Billy, and I, just about everybody who watches the NFL, probably you too, were wondering before the playoffs in the National Football League got started, does Tom Brady have one more run in him? Okay, well, now he doesn't need a quarterback. Fox Sports is taking care of him. But in all seriousness, let me ask you about the Penguins. If they're in the playoffs, okay, does Sidney Crosby at this advanced stage, and he's still got a core of those guys who were, Stanley Cup winners not that long ago, do they, considering the opposition they'd be going up against, do they have maybe one more run left in them?
Well, certainly. Those kind of elite athletes that they've got at least 3 that are capable of carrying teams, and in my opinion, they get excited when it's crunch time, and they've proven that in the past. And so you'll have a group of, whether or not they've got to make the playoffs first, but they have a group of athletes who've proven over the years that they can rise to the occasion and they can bring a team to where they want to go.
Speaking of making the playoffs, Duds, obviously we've got to put it right on you. The Panthers, much was expected this year, and again, you're in a tug of war with Detroit, with Buffalo. When you flip to the other side, you got a whole slew of teams fighting for the 2 wild card spots. So, given where you're at, all clubs got maybe 2 games in hand on you. Have the Panthers decided in which direction they're leaning towards? Do those discussions continue, or are you guys more likely to add, subtract, or stand pat?
No, I think we like the way we've been playing lately, and I don't think, Billy's a pretty bright guy, and he's not going to do anything that's silly. But I
thought you were talking about me when you said I'm a bright guy. I started thinking it happened. But anyways, you're talking about
the other Billy in my life.
All right, okay, sorry.
But I think he's looking to make trades that make the team better. If there is such a thing out there, I don't know. Billy will be, certainly he's shown the ability to act on trades and make it happen. I don't know. We're going to talk in the next few days about that.
Rick, let me ask you about the acceleration, like not only on the ice but in terms of the career. Connor McDavid, where he's at in terms of, the guy is a freight train on skates with generations.
Acceleration is a word for it.
generational is already like too widely used, but with his skill, strength, speed is like, is there anybody, I mean, anybody historically in the NHL that compares to, you say, well, he reminds me of, or is he one of these like from another universe? He's so unique and skilled and strong.
Nobody that I've ever seen has the complete package that he has. The amazing speed, the ability to carry the puck at that speed, he can make a play, he can do anything he wants to do, I think he's a generational athlete, because I think you don't have to be a hockey fan. You can watch a hockey game and appreciate what this fellow does. He shows things. You said acceleration at the start, and he can the way he can turn and accelerate and beat people, and I've seen him beat top defensemen as if they were kids. They were kids right out of junior, and it really is amazing. I think he may be one, if not the most talented player of all time. He's certainly in the conversation.
Here's the problem, Duds, though. He's got he's obviously unbelievable. The only guy that I can ever think, like in my head, that I've seen with my own eyes that carries the puck at that speed, obviously different player, was Pavel Bure at one time. Similar jets in that kind of way, even though McDavid's probably the better player. But here's the problem with a guy like that, Duds. He's got as many rings as me and Rumack. We're tied. Me, him, and McDavid, we got one thing in common. We got no rings. How long before a guy like that gets tired coming up on free agency and then decides that, like at some point in time, if you want to be one of the great ones, right, you got to win, don't you?
Well, you do, and it's unfair because a great player like Marcel Dionne played his entire career in LA when they weren't a challenging team, a team that was going to challenge for a Stanley Cup. He was still a wonderful player, probably not given the respect he deserves. There's a few of those around, and so far, and I think Edmonton's a pretty good team, but so far Connor McDavid hasn't been on a team that can help him win a Stanley Cup. I don't think. I don't think it's Connor McDavid that fails. I think that team may end up being special.
You
with
think
him, with him in the driver's seat?
Yeah, well, you figure the Western Conference. If you look at it again, Colorado with O'Kale is not the club they were last year. Whereas the East, it looks ram-packed. If not this year for McDavid and the Oilers, given how the West is, in my estimation, completely open. Right? So it's a big year for it. It's a big year.
It's a good question. It's a good question. If the Oilers play their best game with regularity, they're a pretty damn good team. That's not easy to do through a couple of months of playoffs, but perhaps they can do it, and they could be a team that emerges from the West. They certainly have the ability to do that.
Rick, looking at the club, you were on a Stanley Cup final with them. Boy, did you guys have talent. I mean, the French Connection, just for starters there. What a great team Punch Imlach, drafted and assembled out of expansion in 1971 to get the Sabres, including you, to a Stanley Cup final against the Broad Street Bully Philadelphia Flyers in 75. Pretty amazing how quickly the Sabres got out of the chute and made a name for themselves and were so beloved and still are in Buffalo. With the youngsters they have now, they're kind of a team of extremes, a polarized. They can look great and beat anybody, and they can look like awful and lose to anybody. Is that part just the growing pains of the young talents that they have?
Now, are we talking about Buffalo now?
Yeah, the current Buffalo Sabres.
Buffalo's got something they haven't had. Well, and I can't say they haven't had. They've got a coach who the players believe in, and he appears to be a guy that's got them on the same page. And he happens to be a friend of mine, but that's okay. But I think he's got them. And you look at we talked about Tage Thompson earlier. Look at what Tage has done under Donnie Granato, and look at the other people. Cousins, how he's emerged, and you can go down the list. Rasmus Dahlin was, for a few years, he struggled. He really did, and now he's a Norris Trophy candidate. I think the Sabres are in a place. Back then we had Floyd Smith, and he was the right coach for that team, the perfect coach for that team, because you enjoyed going to the rink every day with Floyd. You just did.
Why?
Because he was a decent human being, and if he gave you crap, it was because you deserved it, and you knew it. And you weren't going to be able to say that guy's a jerk to one of your teammates. They're going to say, no, what he told you is exactly what you did or what are. And so I think Donnie's like that. I think that Rod Brindamore's like that. I think that there's a number of guys like that in the National Hockey League now, and they're having great success.
Here's it. Sorry, Rick. I wanted to ask you just a little bit. I don't know. It just came to me a little bit out of the box. So you've been around the game forever, and for probably as I mentioned earlier, real respected and loved guy. You're tough as nails, and you got a pretty solid IQ too, man. I'd hover a guess somewhere around the 150 range. Articulate as can be, and punches guys out, man. That's an all-encompassing guy. So I'm gonna challenge you to a quick question, and it might take. It might require a little bit of impromptu thinking on your part. So let me get to it. Give me Rick Dudley's top three. No, I'm going to chop. Give me Rick Dudley's top 4 guys in his hockey life, in the game that he's met, that if he could go out to dinner, like either they're here with us or they're gone. Give me your top 4 guys that Rick Dudley would like to go out for dinner in his 40 years. In his 40 years as part of the game.
Boy, that's tough. Larry Carrier.
I told you, man. It's a big one, Dudley.
Larry Carrier, Dave Taylor, Jim Gregory, Danny Gare.
Wow.
That's simple, eh? Is that in that specific order?
No, that's just the first 4 names that came to mind that I have a warm spot for when I think about them. I think of them as Dave Taylor was my boss in LA, and he was just a class act. Jim Gregory, nicest man I've ever known. And Danny Gare and Larry Carrier, great teammates and great leaders and people that I look forward to seeing anytime I see them.
Who's the biggest spender of the 4?
That's a good question. Not sure. It could be tickets, Danny Gare.
Yeah. Sure. So the majority of the time, it's not Dudley going in his pocket for that dinner. It's Gare.
I wasn't one of the 4. I don't want it. I'm not going to say me.
Rick. Sorry, I was just going to say this. It's interesting. You mentioned Jim Gregory. I got to know him when I was a volunteer way back, working with my buddy. I was a volunteer with the Toronto Marlboros when they were in the Ontario Hockey League. And actually, even further back, when Roger Nielsen was coaching the Leafs, I approached Jim Gregory, hey, could I do some volunteer work? But anyway, later on, I got to know him when I was working with the Marlboros. And then recently, just before he passed away, I'd seen him up at the Pickle Barrel restaurant. A lot of people in Toronto know where that is, near Shepherd and Leslie. And there's one.
They're not a sponsor, Norm. Don't say that.
Yeah, well, that's okay. They're a nice place. Maybe they will be. But you're right about Jim, because I always found him like, okay, so who am I, right? I was just like a relative. I mean, he knew me, obviously got on the fan, but he knew me way before the fan. And it didn't matter, like, your status. You could always have a nice conversation. And, it was just like a sweetheart of a guy to talk to. And maybe the public didn't know him so well, but for people like yourself, as I got to know him, what a nice, down-to-earth man. And, he worked under Harold Ballard, which was no piece of cake when he was the GM of the Maple Leafs. And he managed to finesse that, and he had those, teams under Roger Nielsen and Red Kelly, pretty good teams, and he made some pretty good trades. But more importantly, as you say, just a hell of a nice man he was. God rest his soul.
And it went way beyond just the surface. He did things for people without asking for any recognition whatsoever. I know several cases where he helped people out because of his position in the National Hockey League. And he didn't have to. He didn't get any acknowledgement from it. He just did it. And I just thought he was a class act, just a class act.
Yeah, there were Maple Leafs that I heard about that were struggling in various different ways we won't get into. But you're right. He did his best to help them and protect them, and was like a father, grandfather figure. You're right. Most of those stories will never be known in public.
That's right. And I kind of like that. From Jimmy didn't need recognition. He was just trying to help.
You got it. 100%.
Awesome. We're with Rick Dudley, special advisor of the Florida Panthers. 7:50. We've got about 10 minutes left, Dud. So obviously there's you know what the Toronto hockey market's like, and obviously there's a sense of building anxiety towards the future. Lifetime of disappointments over here. 50 plus year run. No Stanley's in town. So take Rick Dudley's crystal ball. Let's assume that the Leafs play the Florida Panthers, home ice to be determined. How does Rick Dudley see that matchup? And I don't know if you're comfortable, but at the end of the day, if those two teams play, are you willing, and who would you see prevailing in that series, assuming the rosters are the same after the trade deadline as they are today? And the second part to that question, I want you to, as a scouting guy that knows the game inside out, I want you to tell Leaf fans the acquisition today of McCabe. What kind of guy is he? You can take them in any order.
I like the addition of McCabe to start with. I think he's a guy that, for a period of time in Buffalo, he was played 20 plus minutes and very successfully. Went to a team that wasn't having a whole lot of success. I think he got hurt there, but now he's with a team that expects to win. And I think he likes to play in that environment. I like the player. I don't know the person, but I like the player. I've heard nothing but good things.
John Dudley.
I heard nothing but good things about him as a human being. But so I like that. What was the next part of it?
Who you got? Tampa Bay, Toronto. Break it down. Who do you got? Who does Dud's got?
I can't.
Rick Dudley's not the special advisor. No, he's just shooting the breeze. Who do you got?
There's so many variables there. Tampa Bay has one huge advantage, and that's their goaltender's proven how good he can be when the money's on the line. I think if the Leafs can get goaltending that's equal to Tampa Bay, they've got a chance to win. Mm-hmm. If they get vastly, they're both good teams. If they get vastly outplayed in the nets, then I think they're in trouble.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Rick, I wanted to go in a bit of a different direction because you played in an era where, fighting was part of the game, and you were one of those tough fighters, and you took on all the biggest, the baddest, and the best. So for those of us like myself, kind of like Jurassic Park age, who remember that, and I'm talking about good, clean fights, not dirty stuff, not sticks and spears, but just dropping the gloves, as gentlemen doing your job. So including the guys you fought and the guys who came after you, I'll bet you a lot of our viewers, wherever they are, would like to know who would be in your top, let's say, 5 or 6 fighter guys who were pugilists and did it well that you would pick in your top 5, whether from your era or after.
Well, I got to put my buddy Dave Schultz in there because of the fact that he was a guy that he used it to help his team win, and he'd fight anybody. That's one. Larry Playfair was a guy who didn't fight a lot, but when he did, you better be ready because he could hurt you. I'm thinking back in my era. I run into the 90s.
The Kellys, the Battleship, and the Hound Dog.
Well, Battleship was a scary. He was a scary fighter. He could hurt you, and Bob was a tough guy too. Those were both the Kellys were tough guys. Different fighters. Battleship was more of a puncher, and if he landed one, it could hurt somebody. I saw him hurt somebody, but the Hound was more of a guy who could hang in there forever, and he could go for a while. And he was a tough guy.
And Rick, in a fantasy match, if you were to pit them, so to speak, against years later, someone like, a name that a lot of people think might be the greatest, toughest fighter ever, and Bob Probert. How would you think that? Are they about equal?
No. Something happened in the 90s where size, the Proberts and the Dave Browns and the kid out in Minnesota, Bugard, they got so big that Battleship Bob Kelly was was probably 6'2", but a rail thin guy. He wasn't he would fare pretty well. Bob the Hound was not a big man. He was a strong guy, but he was not a big man. It would be very difficult for him to fight one of those guys with the reach that they had. I think that era of the 90s was when some of the toughest people came into the game, because it became almost a science. You had to have one of those guys. Yeah. When I played, you had team toughness. When I played, you had team toughness, and you had some people on your team that could fight. But it became something different in the 90s.
Good answer.
One of the more underrated guys, Duds, and not really known for his pugilism, was I guess you'd say you testified better than anybody, but from my memory, and I was a young guy, Larry Robinson was not one gentleman that you would want to get angry.
He was a powerful guy. He really was a wonderful guy. But he was a powerful guy. I played against him both in the American League and the NHL, and you just kind of left. He's one of those guys that, there's used to be an old saying, "Let him sleep." You really didn't want Larry all wound up. He could do some damage. He was a powerful guy.
Okay. Hey, Rick, I'm just going to throw one other name out of left field, and because he was a Buffalo Sabre, Toronto Maple Leaf. I knew Terry Martin when he was coaching the Marlboro Juniors, because I was a volunteer then with them. And I know he was a fun guy, smiling guy, but if he got pissed off, you were going to know about it. He had that kind of like what they would call 1,000-yard death stare. I heard, and you can tell me it's true, that Terry Martin didn't fight very often, but he was so scary when he fought, and he would be classified as a middleweight. He got quickly a reputation amongst the heavyweights. That's not someone you want to mess with. And as a middleweight, he'll embarrass you. Am I right?
Well, I think he's a guy that the other team said, just, leave him alone. Don't get him wound up, because he's a much more effective when he's nasty. And Terry was a good hockey player, and at times he got himself in an agitated state, and it was unusual, but it was kind of fun to watch.
You never the receiving end of it, though.
Rick, you've never been really, in your time behind the bench, you've never really been agitated, have you?
Oh, are you being funny? I was a silly goose. I admit it. I used to abuse the referees because I didn't want to yell at my players. So I would yell at the referees, and I'm sure that every referee that refereed a game that I had probably remembers, because I yelled at them almost constantly, and it was.
Did you have one you would go after all the time?
Funny thing is, later in Florida, I was asked to coach because we had let our coach go, and I didn't want to coach. I really didn't. I was past that. And I ended up coaching at the end of the year, but I did it in a different manner. And I ended up being very relaxed at that point in my life. I had done most of the things I wanted to do in hockey, and I was kind of relaxed on the bench. I had fun with it.
Yeah. Rick, you weren't on any of those highlight reels. Like, I forget, there's an all-time famous one on YouTube and everywhere else where some coach, was it the American League or the Central League, picked up a bench and threw it on the ice. You know that? I don't remember which coach that was. It's funny as hell.
I've been shown a few videos of me on the bench that were, I won't say embarrassing, but they were classic, I guess. I got wound up once in a while, but I did it. Part of it was an act. Part of it was to You wanted the other team, as a coach, you wanted the other team to think, especially if you had the horses, you wanted the other team to think you were a little bit off the wall, and a little cracked. And I used to do that on purpose because I wanted them to go, oh, geez, he'll send out the hounds. When we had a line with Jeff Parker, Rob Ray, and Kevin McGuire, and I don't think the other team wanted to see a lot of them, because they could go out and they could do whatever. They could hit. They were good enough to hit and bang. They could really fight.
You weren't sending those guys out on the power play.
Not a lot, but every once in a while when they deserved it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I always thought when those people do the job for you, like those guys did a job for our hockey team. We ended up third overall, and they were a big part of it. And they made the other team take notice, and we didn't get our Pierre Turgeons and Alex McGillney's and people like that didn't get the abuse that they might have gotten if it wasn't for the fact that those three guys were sitting on the bench ready to go out for a shift, and nobody was going to abuse them. So they, every once in a while, I'd put Robbie Ray and net front on the power play.
Yeah,
because I was just, and it would be a situational thing, but it would be just saying thanks for doing what you do.
Absolutely. Before I got a chance to meet you, I didn't get a chance to have you on the show and talk to you, I was a little scared of you. Like, I don't know, holy jeez, man, this guy's like, I'm lucky that we're separated by a continent right now. Like, you know, but did you ever use fear? Like, how much because I'm curious as a coach myself, how much of fear did you use as a tactic when you're talking about obviously some of the rehearse stuff, some of the stuff you do for things? How much did you rely on fear in the room as part of your recipe?
Well, I think I wasn't a guy who lost it on his team a lot, but I felt that there was a need to know. The players need to know that you can snap. And I believe that some very talented coaches have not made it because they didn't have that capacity. And I think it's something you can I didn't have to teach myself that, but I think you can actually teach yourself to once in a while go in and just lose it completely. And I used to do things like I'd pick up a water cooler and throw it across the dressing room or something just to get their attention. And I think the players felt like I cared about them. And I hope they cared about me, and they didn't want me in that agitated state.
Rick, you know, we all know the classic, the late Paul Newman movie Slapshot, and kids I hear that ride the buses, junior hockey all over Canada and around the world, they still watch it years after it came out in 1977. But as a pro, and you know, you've seen everything. Okay, so for lack of a better term, how much of that Slapshot movie with what they showed and some of the stuff that probably, you know, fans weren't aware of or had only heard about, how much of that movie in terms of the things they depicted can you relate to and have a laugh at?
Oh, I had lots of laughs at it. It was kind of a catch-22 for me because I was a hockey player, and it took it to where it was almost professional wrestling, and hockey's never been that. Hockey is a tough sport. There was a time when fighting was a part of the game. If you had the toughest team, you had a pretty good chance to win. I don't think it ever got quite like Slapshot, but there were times, I suppose, and again, I didn't have the luxury of playing I played part of a year in the International League, but I never played in the Eastern League, and I never played much in the IHL. So I don't know, in those lower levels of professional hockey, I suppose it got to be a gong show of sorts. And that movie was based on something, the Johnstown Chiefs, I believe, but that was the Eastern League, and they would have 3.5-hour games because of the fights.
Yeah. Well, in the WHA, Rick, you played against the Hansons, did you not? The Harry Neal's team, Minnesota, right?
Yeah, we did. That was an interesting group. Yep, they were crazy. That was at a major league level. That was probably, I don't know, the closest to a farce that you're going to see. Not because there weren't good players on that team, but because the tactics were such that you knew you were going to have to fight if you played them. And it was, you know, you've got players like Robbie Fedoruk I played with, and Robbie is one of the best hockey players I've ever seen, and he had to put up with things that he shouldn't have had to put up with. It's
funny that you guys mentioned that, because about a month or so ago at at a restaurant that we formerly did a show at. If I had the chance to meet the cast, they were doing a reunion, so the whole cast of the Slapshot movie were there. Got a chance to sit down with them, and believe me, like 30 years later, they're all still nuts, man. Couple pops, man, and I'm telling you, man, like you're looking at the guy and you don't want to say the wrong thing, man. Like here's the funny thing you notice, Duds, about all those guys, man, especially the toughest guys from back. They all got monster hands, man. Big goddamn mitts, man. Right?
Yes, and the Carlson brothers were tough.
Yeah,
they were. That was what the central figures in that show, on ice. The Carlson brothers, they were that tough. Jack Carlson was a scary human being.
Speaking of scary human beings, sorry to stop you in the middle because we ran a little bit over time, and my producer's just actually whispering in my ear. So Norm, you want to ask Duds? Got anything in reserve you want to ask Duds before we call it a night?
Yeah, I'll ask you because I know I've never asked you, so I haven't heard it asked before. But in your hockey career, Rick Dudley, of course, a Stanley Cup Finals with Buffalo, but maybe it's your first game, your first goal. You had to pick out a top memory for Rick Dudley's personal top memories from his career as a player. What would it be?
That's a good question. That's a tough
question. Time, Norm.
I got a hat trick once in Madison Square Garden, I believe it was. That was kind of fun. I suppose the biggest thrill for me, I came back from the WHA and I was sold back, and I scored 19 seconds into my first shift, and they gave me about a 20. It seemed like a 20-minute standing ovation, and to be on the ice with Gilbert Perreault and Rick Martin and Donnie Luce and Craig Ramsey and all the people, Rennie Robert, and to be on the ice with them and to get recognized that much, it was a thrill.
Yeah, that is special.
Neil Diamond once said hello to me from the stage at his concert.
Really? That's a big deal too.
His son had my jersey on, and he asked the crowd what it was, and it was the Stingers in Cincinnati, and he said, "Who are the Stingers?" And everybody yelled "hockey team," and they yelled "number 9," and "who's this Dudley?" And people knew I was there, and they started pointing, and the light shone up. The light shone on me in the crowd, and I waved at him, and he waved back. And I met him after the concert, and he seemed like a really decent guy.
Geez, Rick, I was thinking maybe like that they do at Fenway Park. Maybe at the Panthers home games, you should get the DJ playing "Sweet Caroline" in the intermission or something.
I like this.
That's awesome, Rick. I can't thank you.
I was a big Neil Diamond fan, by the way.
I can't thank you enough, Rick, for your time, for taking us pretty much anywhere. Memory lane, the past, what's going on these days, not only with you, your organization, but around the league, man. You're as smart as you are tough, and you're what appears to me from the beginning. I know I'm not. You saw the beginning. I'm hardly ever wrong. So I gotta say that you're a top of the line gentleman, and that's fine. And I really appreciate you coming on board. Norm, it was a pleasure once again to have a little bit of time with you. You're one of the greats as well. So just for me to get a chance to spend an hour or so of my life with you guys is always a pleasure. For those of you watching at home or in replay, we appreciate you. We appreciate your patronage and hope you'll tune in again next Monday, 7 p.m. Who knows who's going to be around, but you better believe it's going to be me and Rumack. Thanks, Duds. Take good care.
Hey, guys.
God bless. Thanks, Rick.